Giving your players fun and interesting ways of getting different vehicles into their gameplay is a good way to keep them engaged in your server. Let's say, for example, you remove the old-fashioned ability of buying vehicles from the actual server and your players had to find alternative ways of getting vehicles. It's a really good way to keep your players engaged. So today I'm going to show you a way where you can convert certain supply drop signals into dropping specific vehicles. And in comes our spiffy new minicopter, being brought in by a pilot, dropped off by the cargo plane. And the plugin that you're going to need to make this all happen for your players is AirDroppedVehicles by Viz Entities from the Game for Freak website. Hey everybody, welcome back to Rust Admin Academy, where I'm teaching you everything that you need to know about owning and operating a successful Rust server. On this channel, I do plugin reviews and tutorials, plus I want to give you all of those little tips and tricks that are going to help you be more successful. So if you're brand new to the channel, consider subscribing so that you stay up to date on everything that we're working on. And of course, you'll get updated as soon as I upload a new video. If you want to help what I'm doing at Rust Admin Academy, head on over to SRTBULL.com, click on the join button in the top right hand corner and become a member today. It gives you full access to my members only Discord, private one-on-one conversations, plus you get access to member exclusive deals. All right, so AirDroppedVehicles is a premium plugin. It's $9.99 USD, but make sure you use my promo code SRTBULL at checkout to save yourself a couple of bucks. AirDroppedVehicles is of course a permissions protected plugin. We'll have to deal with that once we're in game. There's really only one command line that we're going to use in the F1 console, but again, I'll show you that in just a minute. And the configuration file is incredibly easy to navigate, but again, I'm going to show you more about that later. All of this to say, the documentation page for AirDroppedVehicles is fully comprehensive, and any information you're going to need to operate this plugin is available there. Once you have AirDroppedVehicles downloaded to your personal computer, you're going to go into your Oxide plugins folder or your Carbon plugin folder and simply drag and drop it into your file management system in your plugins folder. If you don't have plugin watchers turned on, which I don't, you'll need to do an o.reload AirDroppedVehicles in order to actually trigger the plugin to start functioning. So let's go into the configuration folder and let's go into the AirDroppedVehicles configuration file. I just want to show you this really quick. There are a couple of changes that I did make to my configuration file. You'll notice that the skin IDs that I've used in my configuration file are different from the ones that you will have from the default config file that loads up when you install this on your server. I changed my supply drop skin so that it actually shows on an icon what vehicle this supply drop is going to be calling in. So I've got the minicopter, the scrap transport heli, a rowboat, as well as the rib. So a huge shout out for Nicodemus, because these are actually his skins that I'm using on this plugin, because I much prefer that my players can actually know by directly looking at the icon which vehicle each supply drop is going to call in. I also changed my descent speed to very slow for video purposes. This is way too slow in a real life application. I would highly suggest you don't use the very slow, but I'm glad that functionality is there. I'm going to actually go through right now and change all of mine back to very fast. If the vehicle that's being dropped has the ability to carry fuel, i.e. a helicopter or a boat or something like that, you can control how much fuel is going to be spawned in that vehicle when somebody calls it in using one of these supply drops. Obviously, if you're calling in bicycles or something like that, you don't need fuel, so it's not going to try and put fuel in it. You can also change what the NPC is wearing as they're dropping down with the parachute with your new vehicle. In order to do that, we have to use a plugin called Gear Core. It is also available from the Game for Freak website, and that one is actually free. So you're also going to notice that there's only 4 available vehicles by default. Now, you can add more. You of course can also take vehicles away. It all depends on what you want your players to be able to call in using supply drops. So by default, we have the minicopter, the rowboat, the scrap transport heli, as well as the rib. But let's say we wanted to add more. So all I would do there is grab this section right here, and we're just going to copy that to our clipboard and then repaste it in. So let's go from this comma before and this curly brace after, and then we can drop in that duplicate right there. So now you can see that we've got 2 that look exactly the same. But let's go through and make some changes. So let's say that we wanted to turn this into a snowmobile supply drop signal. So let's grab the skin ID for this snowmobile right here, grab that, put it on our clipboard, go back over to our configuration file and change this skin ID to the new one that is now indicative of the snowmobile. All right, now we also need to change the supply signal display name. It's no longer going to be a scrap transport heli. It's going to to be the snowmobile. So let's grab that, take that back over here, pasta that in right there. We also need to grab the asset location for the prefab and put that in right there. And everything else can stay the same. We're going to drop it very fast. We're going to have 150 fuel in the tank. I don't know how much it actually takes. And we're also going to allow the NPC to be dressed up as a pilot using the gear core plugin. So let's save that file. Let's reload the plugin. Let's go back to the doc page and grab this command right here. This is just the default command. We're going to make some changes to it once we're actually in game. Once we're in game, the first thing that we have to deal with is the permissions, because we're not going to be able to run any of these commands if we don't have the permission granted to our player character or a group to which we are a member of. So I'm going to use admin menu by chaos code. Let's go into permissions. Let's go into groups. Let's go into admin, and we need to look for the airdropped vehicles permission, which is right here. And as you can see right here, I already have this permission granted to me. However, you will not. Another really important theme that seems to be coming up repeatedly is just because you're the owner of the server or you have auth 2 granted to yourself, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have permission to work with all of these individual plugins. In fact, in most cases, authorization level 2 doesn't mean that you have permission to use a plugin. So let's go into our F1 console. Let's pasta that command in there like that. We're going to change the player to which we're going to give this supply drop to. Change it to living, which is me. We're going to grab the skin ID that we've now used for our snowmobile supply drop and put that in right there. We're also going to grab the display name, which in this case is just snowmobile. And then of course, how many of them we want to give, which in this case, it's just one. So hopefully when I hit enter here, we're going to end up with a snowmobile skinned supply drop on my hotbar. So chat says it's good. We got the right supply drop and the skin finally loaded. And there we go. We now have a snowmobile supply drop in our hotbar. So I'm going to throw this in just a minute here, but I want to show you what I did on my particular server in order to get these supply drops into players' hands. In my case, I just added it as a kit. You of course could do any number of different things. You could do custom vending machines. You could sell these supply drops in your own GUI store right in the game. You could sell them directly from your website. There's any number of different ways that you can get these supply drop signals into your players' hands. So I'm just going to go into my kits menu. I'm going to create a new kit. I'm going to call this one snowmobile supply drop. I'm going to copy the items from my inventory and then click on save kit. Now, when I go through my kits, I should be able to find right here at the very end, the snowmobile supply drop. So that's how I'm doing this on this particular server. But like I said, there's any number of different ways that you can do this. There's nothing stopping you from putting this in your loot table if you have a customizable loot table that allows you to put skinned items on your loot table. All right, so let's just toss this supply signal and make sure that it's actually going to work the way that I planned on it. All right, so here comes our plane. And sure enough, there's our pilot dropping down with our new snowmobile. All right, so that works perfectly. I also wanted to show you another little feature of this plugin. You'll see, so this one is dropping incredibly fast. We have it set at the very fast setting, but you're going to see something really cool happen that is a really nice touch for this plugin. Right before it lands on the ground, it slows right down so that nothing crashes down to the ground and causes damage. It's perfect. All right, so all of that was just to show you that you can completely customize the configuration file for airdropped vehicles. If there's vehicles currently on the list that you don't want, or if there's vehicles that you would like to see added to it, you have the ability of doing that. Again, having a look at the documentation page, you can see all of the different vehicles that are available. I do find it strange, however, that the attack helicopter is not on there. I don't mean the big patrol heli, I mean the attack helicopter that players can actually fly and use on all servers. While we're looking at the documentation page, it's also really important that I note that you can also add all of Caruza's vehicles into this plugin and be able to bring those vehicles in using these very same supply drops. So if you're trying to think of a way to implement Caruza's vehicles into your server, this is a great tool for that. Now, one of the great things that I've enjoyed about Visanity's plugins is all of the ones that I've worked with so far are basically drag and drop, and they work right out of the box. You don't have to go through a bunch of customization or configuration setup in order just to get it working on your server. You drag and drop it, you reload it if you need to, and boom, it just works the way that it's intended. And then you can go in after and make changes as your server or your community demands. And airdropped vehicles is no exception to that rule. The only changes that you would have seen to my configuration file is the airdrop speed and the different skins that I use for my supply drops. Now, I'm sure people are wondering why I'm always talking about the workshop skins as opposed opposed to official Rust skins. And based on the changes that Facepunch has made to their terms of service, I'm always going to be encouraging people to use workshop skins for anything in game. Never try to use any official skins. Not that I think there are any official supply drop skins or anything like that, but I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention why I'm always talking, especially lately, why I'm always talking about the workshop skins. None of these skins will violate the terms of service from Facepunch, never putting your server at any type of risk whatsoever. The last thing that any of us want to do is get in trouble with Facepunch and have our server blacklisted, or worse yet, completely taken offline altogether. In the future, I have a chunk of videos coming out. I think there's going to be about 9 or 11 of them altogether. One of them is going to be Gear Core. You saw me mention Gear Core in this video, and I didn't show you anything about it because that is coming up in a future video. But if you want to make sure that that NPC that's dropping down with the parachute and your new vehicle is dressed in some clothes, you're going to want to check out Gear Core. It's a super simple plugin to use. It's free and really easy to set up, so have no fear there. You can put that NPC in clothes if you want to. You all know how I am with finishing details, and seeing an NPC dropping down with no clothes on is not exactly ideal. It makes it feel really unpolished. So I highly encourage everybody that's using this plugin to grab the Gear Core plugin and familiarize yourself with it, because we're going to be using it in future videos. And speaking of being able to create things that you're not supposed to be able to create using different tools within the game, for example, supply drop signals or grenades, you're going to want to check out this video on the left-hand side of your screen right now to see how you can make it so that your players can use an F1 grenade and create a base out of nowhere. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next week.